This is the second Zoom retreat. This is year 19, guys. Let us hope that year 20 will be in person on the mountain.
Amen.
Amen. First reader tonight is Leslie Gerber, who was born in Brooklyn in 1943. He earned a BA in creative writing from Brooklyn College, and he's lived in or near Woodstock since 1970. His books are The Lives of the Poets, The Edge of Sleep, and Losing Tara. And he publishes classical music CDs and DVDs as Parnassus Records. Leslie, I will spotlight you.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I'm going to start off with a seasonal appropriate poem. It's called August. It's my feelings about it. Summer has tipped over the edge, rolling downhill out of control, bumping and twisting on uneven ground. Every day of rain, a game called. Every day of work, sun down the drain. Only mid-August, it's already over. My mind shades into chilly fall, the leaves barely up there, falling in my eyes. Too late to take a walk, too late to sit on the beach, too late, already too late. This is one I like that I haven't read in a while. It's called The Caddy's Lament. You'll recognize its source. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His irons, too, he'll often throw when missing shots and hurt my ear with curses loud and raining blows. We caddies always think it queer, the awful language that we hear, and balls and clubs land in the lake whenever he is drinking beer. He gives his caddy's neck a shake as if to see if it will break. The only other sound is, creep, it's you who causes my mistake. The grass is lovely, sand traps deep, but we have greens that we must keep, and miles to mow before we sleep, and miles to mow before we sleep. This one is called Carnival, but if you could see it, you would see that it's spelled C-A-R-N-E, Carnival. Out in nature, quoth the sage, nothing dieth of old age. Even skunks and porcupines, cars whiz by and crush their spines. Why then should I not complete this death cycle by eating meat? I answer, in eternity's sands, why have blood upon my hands? Why should I shoot the mighty bear when I can always eat a pear? The piglet cries out for the sow, and I'm too damn fat anyhow. Replieth sage, O foolish man, what's that in your frying pan? Bacon, tofu dogs, you might as well be eating frogs. I found I could no more resist. I beat him senseless with my fist. Alas, that sage had one more trick. I ate him, and he made me sick. The Hospital for Permanent Adults. This is where we stay, one to a room. We always piss in the toilets. We never get drunk even when there's wine. Running is not permitted, but that's okay. Most of us can't run. We lurch, hobble, limp. Wheelchairs are available. Breakfast is served at 5 a.m., so most of us get our own. It's usually just gruel, seldom eggs, never bacon. During the day, they play the kind of music we used to hear in department stores. At night, they show us movies like It's a Wonderful Life or Groundhog Day. I keep asking for The Exterminating Angel, but it's not available. God speaks to us occasionally. We don't understand what she has to say, and we never ask each other. This place seems like an inappropriate reward for a life as well lived as mine. but that's just my opinion. I expect that at least we'd be encouraged to mingle, but someone's always frowning. There aren't any flowers in here, even on my sheets. The walls are all pastel colors. My bed is so hard, I usually wind up with a backache. My bright Guatemalan clothing I loved to wear has all vanished. Last week, I took a walk into town. After all, we're not prisoners. But when I got there, everything was so strange. Nobody wanted to give me directions, and the noise was disturbing. I didn't want to buy anything, even if I'd had any money, because I would have had to carry it back. So I returned. A woman greeted me at the door. I wondered where you were, she said, as she gave me a permitted kiss. Buddhism misrepresented begins with a quote from the poet Huyen Quang of the Qian dynasty in Vietnam. I grow old, impatient with my idol singing. If all is illusion as the Buddha preached, why is this snow so cold on my skin? Why does it make my dog limp? Is she subject to illusion also? Life demands strange things. If I wish to sit writing idly all day, I must instead discover if my car is free enough of the illusion of cold to take me to the pet shop, where I can buy shoes for the dog, a concept of surpassing strangeness, like buying a leash for me. If I do not go out and walk in this illusionarily hostile environment, I freeze up in other ways. Old joints, for example, demand motion as the price for their continuing function. But are they real? If I condemn them to the purgatory of illusion, won't they just quit bothering me? Alas, dear Buddha, whose tiny replica has taken up residence on my desk, can't you free me from all these imaginary demands of life? It truly seems that unless I pay the oil bill, my wife, my dog, and I will freeze to death, thus ending all these daily demands, but leaving me unlikely to be reincarnated as favorably as my wife and well cared for dog. This is one of a group of what I call cynical psalms that I've been writing recently. This one's called the Psalm of Confident Superiority. The Lord has granted unto me the power to discern the great difference between myself and the wicked. Through reading the proper texts and listening fastidiously to the words of the wise, I have learned to follow the way of righteousness and truth. See how well I behave? Therefore, I derive the license to label those who fail to agree with me about anything as godless, who will eventually be struck down while in the midst of their evil activities in such a way as to demonstrate the contrasting virtues of the righteous, such as myself, and the moral defects of all others. O Lord, thank you for this delicious sense of righteousness. It provides me with the patience to await the day when my dreams materialize and you remove the wicked from the earth in one flamboyant blaze of glory, leaving me and my acolytes to revel in your bounty. We are counting the days. I make little marks on the wall. Angels and pebbles. This begins with a quote from James Wright. Angels and pebbles mock me under trees. The longer I walk through these woods, the more abuse I receive from my neighborhood trees, who identify me as a typically oblivious human. One particularly saucy pine drops sticky needles through my sparse hair, pricking my scalp, and reflects, there are reasons why you're alone now. Nothing happens by accident. And I'm tired of hearing about your problems. I've got more important things to do. I want to give it a good kick, but I know what would happen to my toes. All right then, Mr. Smarty Bark, what would you suggest I do? The only reply is, I've said enough. I'm thrown back to my childhood and the beautiful trees I loved in Prospect Park, and the way my long walks would be marred by tripping on pebbles. These woods I live among today are dark and deep, but hardly lovely. My fragility deserves some sympathy, I think, instead of all this mockery I get. Pebbles still attempt to trip me. Angels drop their shit on my face. So far, I seem to be enduring. So far. Catch and release. After I let her catch me, 6'2" and shining eyes, I gradually leaned into the idea of forever. She gave our dogs forever homes, but their forever is shorter than ours. She survived 3 pairs of dogs, then wore out, toxic compounds eating her brain and leaving such damage behind. I had no choice in letting her go. There was nothing left by the time she abandoned those last labored breaths. And so, here I sit, drifting on my unmagic carpet, half of myself or less, curious in a detached way to know if someone will come along and breathe my embers back to flame. The kiss. Well, here I sit in my backyard on an early summer day, listening to birds and lawnmowers, just a little too much breeze for comfort. And how can I be comfortable anyway with a bad disc and a woman who kissed like she meant it last month, but told me yesterday it's over? She used to ask me to send a poem every day, but she wouldn't like this one. And right now I don't like her, so I guess that makes us even. I need a nap or a vacation or a double espresso, 2 of which I can provide quickly, but I haven't had a vacation since before the vaccine freed me for certain things, like hanging out with someone who only wants to see me in coffee shops. Sorry, my ex-dear, I can make my own damn coffee, and it doesn't taste any better when I'm looking at someone who used to welcome my poems. After life. When I think of all the things I won't have to do anymore, I look forward to being dead. Sure, walking the dog 4 times a day is usually a pleasure, but sometimes the routine gets on my nerves. Like this morning, when all I wanted out of life was a hot bath and a steaming bowl of cereal. But she wasn't any more interested in walking on snow-covered ground than I was. So when I let her out, she was back at the door within a minute, tail wagging in gratitude as I let her right back in. Opening yesterday's mail is another chore I could do without, especially since it's almost all bills I don't want to pay and requests for donations I don't want to make. Still, there's the occasional check or cheery post from a friend. Mail isn't worth dying to escape. How about the news? That kind of despair can be so difficult to handle. Reading about the squad, those wonderful fresh-faced women, or the boundless compassion of the Dalai Lama makes up for a lot, but some days not enough. If I were permanently asleep, brain burned and ashes scattered, I'd have nothing left to worry about. I'd miss you, though. And I'm going to conclude with a few poems from my book, Losing Tara, An Alzheimer's Journey. I think most of you have probably heard some of these. Ghost walking. She walks through the rooms she once occupied like a ghost, visible, intangible. She does not know these things: window shutters, nightshirt, painting, toothbrush. If she could recognize people in photographs, she would see herself sitting on sand, back to the camera, facing the ocean, and herself in Peru, smiling, surrounded by brown-faced people and llamas, her and her lover hugging his hair still black. Also the dog she loved, now dead, also forgotten people. What is this on the table, round at one end, narrow at the other? It seems to belong in her mouth, but it is too hard to chew. The sounds from that little box are pleasing. She taps her foot. But that person who reaches to touch her and says, "Sweetheart," is he safe? Perhaps it is best not to let him get too close. Feeding. All I wanted was your shining eyes, your fingers, your lips. Looking out the window at you and the birds, your cousins, and the harmony you radiated like June's sun. All I wanted was to see you measuring dog food, baking potatoes, you on the other end of the phone in Hawaii, watching you dress in the morning, becoming a public person whose privacy you gave to me. I wanted the smell of your breath. Often I lay quietly in the morning just to hear you breathe. Maybe it is only fair that now you watch me do all these things you did, maybe not as well. But since you can't say the dogs' names, it may be a great relief to see me feeding them and you. Hearts. I cannot know how it feels, although I have seen it, to have a child come whole out of your body like a tulip from a bulb and start to breathe. But I have felt a child return to the earth, compost, and I know some of your heart goes along and never returns. I know how it feels when a woman sends you love letters from the same house and wants you next to her and inside her. And I know what happens as she fades into the shadows and some of your heart goes with her. I have seen when a heart weakens and cannot propel life into a body anymore and it dies, my mother. And I have seen what happens when another heart breaks and surrenders, my father. So I am puzzled every morning when I get out of bed and start doing things as though the sun was planning on rising anyway. Yeah, I got time for two more. Her watching television. We will never understand what she sees and hears on the TV. Are they just moving shapes, colors, and noises? Or do the words mean something? She pays close attention sometimes. Other times she looks away, drifts off, falls asleep in her chair. Standing in the bathroom, patiently accepting the wipes and creams, she turns when I say, "Okay, sweetie," grabs the walker and strides through the house, avoiding walls and doorways until she arrives at the room and the seat where she will be fed. But she hardly smiles anymore, even at the cute kittens on the TV. She doesn't more, not even to say no when we help her out of the bed where it seems she wants to stay until she melts into it. And I'll conclude with one of the last poems that Tara dictated to me when she had lost the ability to write, but still could think. My secret. I wish that I could write again the way I did in olden days. Whoever changed me into my life has changed me into a sad person who can't remember how she wrote, which never caused her any trouble. They were little challenges. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I have a dream in which I imagine those images coming back to me. When I look up, I find what I dreamed is gone, and I pray for its return. Tara McCarthy. Thank you. Now I can mute.
Our next reader is Joyce Kessel, whom I have just spotlighted. She's a co-editor of Earth Starter's writing collective. And her new collection, Saints of Sacred Madness, A Catechism of Poems, was refined last at an earlier Mayapple retreat when we had manuscript workshops, which I think we will again. I hope we will again. 3 earlier chapbooks have all been workshopped at these retreats, so we have a lot of productivity to claim credit for. She taught at Villa Maria College in Buffalo for 42 years. Joyce.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to start with a couple of poems from my mother, or pieces about my mother. Strawberry Moon. Above a chorus of fireflies, framed by tree branches, the strawberry moon rises in all its summer voluptuousness. It was her birth moon, my mother who loved strawberries, and on her deathbed, she thanked the gentleman, not my father, who honored her birth with strawberries and cream as they rode a train across Europe. This is a prose piece that Wendy helped a lot with, and Leslie. Skatehaven. It was the night the last light of childhood left her eyes. We'd gone every Thursday to Skatehaven because that was the night the pipe organ played for roller skating. Dad was in his pipe organ phase. Later it would be the German Club, later still the Irish Center. Always it was railroads. I wasn't a good skater, and this was before inline skates, but Mom was very good, floating inside the wooden rink, swaying, agreeably joining a conga line, or teaching my brother the best ways to turn or stop. She'd recapture the days when she skated on Hewitt Avenue or in a city rink. Now she was 41, and joy was frowned upon in her marriage. I doubt Dad noticed, though. He was hanging out with Harvey, the organist, enjoying the thumps and wheezes of the just beginning to fail pipe organ. Sometimes I would stand by the wall, mesmerized by the grace I would never master, hoping the organist would just keep playing, praying the lights didn't dim for a last skate. I watched my brother join the end of the usual conga when Mom grabbed on, steadying him and laughing until she caught a skate and fell. With her broken wrist, our Thursday night skates to an end, and sometime later, Skatehaven shut down. It stayed empty as the bellows of that old organ until they gutted the place, turning it into a banquet hall. I never returned until my 8th grade graduation dinner a couple years later. Right where the old rink once was, I strained to hear above the chatter of my classmates, but never caught the wheeze of that old organ or the smooth clatter of skates again. I don't remember Mom ever laughing as openly as those nights, dancing with her skates to that pipe organ. Cardiac kid. When I was a kid in grade school, the specialist told us my heart was growing too fast. I wondered now if the rest of my body ever caught up, or if the doctor planted in me the gift and the curse of a too big and easily broken heart. Been doing a lot of reminiscing, and we moved after 34 years into this new place. And my mother lived in the same house for 50 years, so I was really conscious of old places. The way an old house breathes settles in your bones, a familiar collection of sounds. The complaint of the third stair, the pre-rumble of the furnace firing, the scratch of a tree limb outside, the wind leak to a second-story window, the warning squeak of the front door, the steady beat of a woodpecker. New places have noises you just can't get used to. A drip outside from the eaves, or the laundry room tap, the neighbor's garage door opening, the gurgle of the new refrigerator, the grumble of 2 garbage trucks instead of 1, the chorus of starlings, the eerie silence of the night. I have a lot of night poems recently. This one, many find a little scary. I do too. It's called Vestiges. You come unbidden each night to haunt my dreamlessness when I am without will or defenses. You bring memory without laughter, shadows that form from no light to catch my breath as I swipe at tears that no longer fall. The hours evaporate slowly till dawn's birdsing releases me into the fog of forgetting. Everybody has COVID poems. Kind of had to survive. So this is called obits, but it's really death notices. I just think obits fits better. Pages upon pages draw me into these columns, especially on Sundays. Lengthening lists of names in agate type, carefully crafted final biographies of lives once full, now passing over. Obituaries of those unknown to me, unrecognizable and distant, still are vaguely familiar. Our commonality of geography or age causing a closer reading of relatives and accomplishments. Family histories often tied to ethnic, religious, or old neighborhood funeral homes. Lombardo, Amagon, Pickens, Smolarek. Searching for clues, be it cancer or COVID, that particular sense of loss when two match up as departed spouses within days, believing regardless of cause, it was their broken hearts. I don't want to wrap myself in their grief, just want to sit shiva with survivors, acknowledging the heavy blanketing of their loss will someday be mine. I love looking at old photographs, and I was really studying some and thinking about why people never smiled in them. And so this is about a photograph in sepia. And there's a quote that starts it, "Finally, there's a type whose names fade before they even die." That's by Murakami. Among photographs of people long lost, a name by pencil or year that could have been scrawled on the back. Clustered on porches or in studio chairs, hoping for formally informal, young men uncomfortable in their skin stand near visions of their future selves, mustachioed uncles, hats set on their working men's heads. Daughters close to the bottom of the frame, dressed in white, mirrors of their mother's pasts, all unsmiling, sobered spirits awaiting the flash too long in the sun. Off to the side, unpaired women, poor aunts in their own state of namelessness, bleached shadows fading over years. This is a poem about getting up late at night. It's called Solitaire. It's sad to play solitaire at 3 a.m. How easy it is to avoid this poem, any poem, by mindlessly turning cards. Creativity in switching games, discovering new kinds. Lady Betty, Russian, Pyramid, Scorpion, 40 Thieves. Taking dozens of hands to master them. Reminders of how alone one has to be to get out of bed at this hour and be worldless. Those people who know me know I'm a hugger. And the thing I most missed during this whole thing is the sense of touch. So this is called Stranded. I miss the electricity of touch, the heat of contact, the closeness of flesh, the hug's reassurance, the breath of body on body, the union of beating hearts. I am winter's last seagull on an empty beach, shivering in the all alone. Political poem of a sort. I think I was inspired by Helen and all her bird poems. Migratory failure. You see them as noble birds with iridescent feathers, left to drown and die in heat and hunger. Yet these are earthbound souls daring to cross wild waters with no promise of success beyond their desperation. Thousands in migration, even flocks of fledglings sprung too soon from nests, their wings unsteady and fragile. Suckered by corrupt coyotes, abandoned in high seas and on dark beaches, left to die in stinking refrigerator trucks parked on roadsides to nowhere. Tossed like driftwood, floating bulbous and barnacled, trapped and discarded like windblown bags on barbed wire fences. Birds unable to fly, refugees with no refuge. This is a poem we worked on today. The title is What We Do, and it's for Kathy and Jill. And it begins with this quote from Juan Gabriel Vasquez. If a genie appeared and offered me 3 wishes, that's what I'd ask for, to know how to recognize things that are going to be important later. No one heeds warnings, so we willingly spread diseases, see them multiply, let the planet burn or flood to biblical proportions. We waste resources, plow the forests, watch species go extinct, don't even take the time to spread the blame. I watch with increased horror as some weaponize religion, deny their racism, recast history for their own purposes. Ignoring the cries of the hungry, the suffering, the tortured, we hide in concrete acres, glued to our electronics, willfully blissful in separation, turned against our best selves. Old warrior. I used to march, chant at rallies, send off letters to Congress and newspapers, donate to the correct charities, and the need is still there. There's always a new old cause or an old new one. I've lost the energy for outrage. There are too many battles, so many the same. I am weary, still unsatisfied, worn down, left numb. Watching the news stirs some red cells, but they are not sustained. The fight is gone. If Bob was here, I'm reading this for him because we always have to share baseball poems. Hesitation. If you know the Negro Leagues, Satchel Paige is the pitcher I'm referring to. Some people are born too soon, like legendary old Satch, who pitched thousands of games while stuck in the Negro Leagues with Josh Gibson before crossing the color line Jackie finally broke. The major's oldest rookie at age 42 still confused baseball's best hitters, DiMaggio and Hornsby, with his hesitation pitch until he was 59. In Genesis 19, Lot hastened away from Sodom. If only he had been a baseball fan, his nameless wife could have heeded Paige's advice. Don't look back. Something might be gaining on you, and maybe avoided so much salt. That worry about Lot's wife was one of many questions I had about religion. And I bugged a lot of people. What was Lot's wife's name? What was her name? What was her name? She didn't have one. And so that kind of led into a lot of questions that I had that became the text, Saints of Sacred Madness. So I'm going to read a few poems from there. Standard text. We read this catechism rather than the Bible, recited its call and response questions, worried over rosary beads, and paced the Stations of the Cross, which taught us to love ritual that translated in orderly rows and folded hands that spoke of the right kinds of silence. Little soldiers in the army of Christ, angels with clipped wings. Lesson 5 from the New St. Joseph Baltimore Catechism says, man is a creature composed of body and soul. The soul is like God because it is spirit having understanding and free will and is destined to live forever. Body and soul. Even young, I knew bodies didn't live forever. Parts fail and people die. I didn't understand the concept of a soul. Where in my body did the soul reside? Was it turned on or plugged in at baptism? It couldn't have been in my head. Was it lingering in my heart, invisible to x-rays, fluttering like a winged spirit, protected by my ribs? The lesson on matrimony said, if a girl, for example, has no religious vocation and the only possible partners she meets are non-Catholics or bad Catholics, she should marry an unsuitable partner, even though God would not prefer it. So this was my response to that. Pre-Vatican II, we were just children, captives from 8 to 3. So much seemed backwards. The altar, the priest, the Latin Mass. Later, some things would turn around, but so many projects in religion class were strictly assigned by gender, like the happy marriage formula. Boys, kindness, thoughtfulness, helpfulness, learning to fix things around the house, keeping one's room clean, not throwing things on the floor. Girls, patience, understanding, sympathy, learning to cook, to sew, washing dishes, making beds, cleaning the house, letting others have their own way. Lesson 17 is honoring the saints. Saints were real people like ourselves. They loved God very much while they were on earth, so they now were his special friends. Every card is St. Christopher statue, protecting drivers and passengers, fellow travelers on the highways, but popularity didn't save him. St. Barbara got the axe too, doubts about her and St. George, and other martyrs more legend than proof. Their sacrifices or miracles demoted because of crowded calendars or lack of papal blessings. A clean circle where Chris once stood remained on dusty dashboards as he was hidden in the glove box, just in case he ever did exist. If you've ever taken a ride with a nun, as I did in my grammar school days, it was terrifying. Sister Mary Leadfoot drove the convent station wagon, a vehicular cliche held together by chewing gum, duct tape, and the grace of God. Passengers were required to say the rosary for the car and for their lives. Like question about Lot, one of the stories that really bothered me was the story of the Good Samaritan. And I learned that the parable of the Good Samaritan was not something that really happened, but a story told us to show us how to love one another. This crucial, timeless parable, this primal example of love, that taught us not just to love our parents, our siblings, our neighbors, but even strangers, was fiction, an untrue story. No answer, no lesson disappointed me more. But what about all it taught us about the wrongness of racism, about accepting those different from us, about kindness, mercy, and sympathy? There are stories we just need to be true. Two more. Oaken. The acorn was planted, burrowed into deep soil, flourishing in that dark, taproot spreading wings. Cutting it, once it was established, did nothing to stop the growth. Even years of neglect or blissful ignorance could not prevent the oaken trunk from rising toward the sun. The truth, its resistance, was ever there, easing into the light. It towers now, a lightning rod for the stronger self I've come to be. And this last one is a wish we have for everybody, called Day Sleepers. Let's sleep past dawn, turn off the phone, unplug the TV, ignore the mail in the box, leave the newspaper on the porch, out in the lights, keep the shades drawn, burrow beneath the sheets, speak in language without words. Thank you.
All right. And our last person for the day is Kathy McGold. No, sorry, I'm reading the wrong page here. Penny Levine. Penny Levine lives in the Hudson Valley, across the river from me. She curated 3 performances in Cocoon Theater's Soiree in the Parlor, where she supported poets in the visual and musical performance of their work and set her own poems to music, dance, and theater. She has read her work in many venues throughout the region.
Hi, I'm working on a manuscript called The Architecture That Holds Us. And I'm very interested in how our houses, what they hold, what objects hold, the way they seem to hold memory, and also what our bodies hold. This first poem is What We Belong To. Walking at dusk along our wooded road, we look into our neighbors' lighted windows, their furniture, their private lives unfolding in lamplight. Our houses look small, vulnerable in the landscape. I tell my husband what I'm thinking, the concentrated and intense living that happens in those rooms, anger and grief, dinners and bedtime stories. What must be kept out, the mice and mosquitoes, drafts in winter, heat in summer. My husband is quiet, takes my hand. We circle back. The larger wild world surrounds our houses, trees, swamps, and fields where the birds, the deer, and spiders survive under the raw sky. This next one is called Tiny Stitches, and it comes from finding my grandmother's bathrobe in her old house. tiny stitches. I pull my grandmother's bathrobe, clean with woolite, from the wash basin, buttery yellow, stained in places with jam and breakfast eggs. I found it in a trunk at her old summer home. I examine the many spots where she had mended the frayed silk with tiny stitches and think of her small, precise hands, how they shook, her wobbly handwriting. I don't know what to do with it, the ripped and stained garment. Cut the embroidered blue dragon from the back and make a pillow. I remember her wearing it, cooking me breakfast, 2 baked eggs drenched in cream in a tiny casserole with brass handles, toast with real butter. She was gruff and direct. Once she reprimanded me for slouching and wearing my coat indoors. I was just waiting for her to be ready. I thought she disapproved of me, my reserve and prissy girlishness. Seeing my hurt, my mom said she didn't understand girls. She had raised only sons, loved the mischievousness of my brothers. She'd declare them wicked with such delight. When I was 10, I dug her glasses out of her handbag and gave them to her as she drove. She had recently been in an accident. Her driving scared me. She thanked me humbly. The last time I saw her, I was home from college. She had been more than a year in a nursing home with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. She could no longer speak and lay on a water mattress to help her bed sores. I had not thought she would remember me or that she had ever loved me. When I entered the room, tears streamed down her face. In my laundry room, I shake out the damp bathrobe, position a plastic hanger in the corners, hold it out, examine again the Chinese dragon, her tiny stitches, and the stains. I imagine wearing it Saturday mornings, stirring pancake batter with an old wooden spoon in her ceramic mixing bowl. We had the same name, Penelope Hyde. This next one's a short one, our parents' house. In my room, I would clean and rearrange the furniture every week. When it was done, it would feel fresh and new, and I'd show my mother. If my brother came in and touched anything, it would drive me crazy. I'd have to wait until he left and put it back at just the right angle. If he used my brush or comb, I'd have to soak them in hot water and ammonia. In my room, I almost carved out a place the chaos couldn't penetrate. And one of the real pleasures of putting this manuscript together has been finding old poems and sort of encountering things that I don't really remember, and often finding my children as when they were little. And this one's called Learning Daffodils. My son and I watch a bee work its body around, underneath, and inside the tiny cluster of violet petals that seem to cup the bee, provide a small room. The bee is absorbed and focused. Its wiry legs work quickly, surely, in and out of the irregular crevices of the petals. My son says it's a bug. It's a bee, I say, agreeing. He is looking with absorption and without fear. I think about how 4 days ago he screamed and burst into tears when he saw a moth fluttering by the curtain. perhaps because the moth was inside where it surprised him. He does not know about bee stings. I tell him the bee is taking little sips of the flower's nectar. Oh yeah, he says, in the process of climbing up and placing himself confidently in my lap. We are sitting on the stone stoop. The air is soft and sweet. I see the papery leaves of the Japanese maple just beginning to unfurl, and the delicate tinting of the woods beyond. The grass is jungle green, and the daffodils stand erect. The daffodils, look at a daffodils, my son exclaims each time we leave the house. It is perfectly clear. We will never leave. I do the dishes while you help decipher notes for our son's piano lesson. The greenish light of the TV and waves of a ball game. All the windows are closed and the air conditioning labors. You are too stressed from work. I am always exhausted. The child will eventually grow and leave, but his twin rats are buried by the compost. The tracing of his preschool form, painted in and cut out with his child hands, still hangs on his closet door. Sometimes at night, your bare skin touches mine. We no longer find words that interest the other. What we can't say gets folded and put away under the bath towels. We pretend to know each other, but guard against the other and live in secret. In the morning, I walk the dog. You shave and shower. At night, you walk to the mailbox, sort through the mail. I stir bits of carrots into simmering chicken juices. This does not have a happy ending, or a particularly sad one either. Okay. This one is Unbroken Lines for Ben. After you bled out and survived, I thought of your pain I still carry for you through 30 years apart. What will I do with it when you die? It won't be buried or burned. You don't see how it is in our daughter's broken body, her back run over by an SUV, her head injured overturning her car, like your sister, the aunt she never knew, but resembles in all the pictures. Your sister who raised you, brilliant and wild. She hitchhiked across the country at 17, jumped out of a pickup truck to escape the boys who drove, hit her head and died. It is not all yours. You come from a line of pain. Your mother, from her hiding place, watched her father and aunts murdered in a pogrom, escaped Soviet Russia under machine gun fire. Your father died suddenly when you were 9, then your sister the year after. You didn't expect to live longer than he did. All of Germany was dark and filled with ghosts when we gathered the death certificates of your cousins in Frankfurt, all dead from heart attacks in Auschwitz. Always, you have had to escape, leaving me to carry our love and failure. What will I do with it? Anvil hard, immutable. see. Um, this one is back to my son. We leave our son at college. Whatever had to be lost, we lost. From After You by Farrokhzad. His dad read all the emails, attended all the info sessions, and nagged him about checking deadlines, turning in forms. I took him shopping for toothpaste, bowls and mugs, a hamper, socks. I returned to the stores without him to buy a package of 10 masks and secondhand silverware. We found a rug in the attic that was in his bedroom when he was a baby. I mended a spot and rolled it up with its padding, put it in his room with a pile of college things, waiting for the day we would load them in his car, drive the hour and a half to his school. That day is bright and cool. On the way to the Taconic Parkway, I see 2 deer and a fawn. My mind is full of omens. He follows in his car with his dad, his first venture into Parkway city driving. As we head south, a rainbow-striped hot air balloon hangs above the trees and hills in front of us. What in high, high heaven do you most want to do? My mother asked me the day before she died. The balloon hangs there, suspended over the beginning of our son's adventure. Unloading his things happens much too quickly. 3 trips to the 6th floor, 2 grocery carts full, then a trunk and a pink plushie, Kirby, a round head with feet. During COVID, only one parent is allowed into the dorm. After his dad helps him with the first load, I brace myself to break the rules for a moment in his room. I slip past the dean standing near the entryway, welcoming students and parents. In the elevator, I wonder if his girlfriend, 20 minutes away, is also lugging her stuff to her room with her parents. They have been together 4 years. I think of the changes that happen in college. He pushes the button to the 4th floor and the door closes. I tell him to reach out to us. My voice catches. I say, you carry the world on your shoulders. Be careful of that. I refrain from saying, love will break your heart. His eyes tear up. Entering the suite, we glimpse another boy in the kitchen, his back to us. It seems wrong to break the silence. Finally, in his room, a double without roommate, I look out the windows, hang up an armful of clothes, lay down the rug, resist the impulse to unpack and put away his things. Instead, I take pictures of him without his mask, his legs stiff-kneed, his face soft, glassy-eyed. It is hard to smile. There is something fleeting I want to catch in the lens. At the car, more pictures, masks on, my arm around him, clutching his shoulder. And then I have 3 more poems. The next 2 are my mother poems. What she said and what she could not say. The secret of her pain showed only in the stiffness the camera saw. In college, she was thin, she said, too thin. Later, She carried too much weight and hated her body. Long before we were born, her father had sent her into confusions she could not resolve. She told me, just don't think about it. I heard, don't feel. Silently, she carried generations of shame. I learned looking in a mirror was shameful. I feared the power of my beauty. My daughter carries shame in her frail frame. My brother, like her father, was full of charm, brilliant, and violating. She said, forgive, but meant forget. She told me, don't look too closely. Her clothing was vibrant. She woke early in the morning to swim in frigid water. She grew dripping wisteria vines, erupting hydrangea trees, garden beds scattered with color all summer long. Hands caked with soil, standing at the kitchen counter, she would clip and compose the blossoms to spray up, spill out of the vase. Color animated the rooms of her house. The song of her voice calling out hello, part celebration, part admonition to be more cheerful. She had not meant to teach us conflict. She held tight her daddy, her shame. Waiting for COVID-19 landscape with the fall of Icarus. March 2019. Even as illness and death invisibly arrive, are in fact always arriving. The roadside brambles open their tiny, delicate leaves. The trees bloom red at each twig end. The workers in Bruegel's painting, lost in private preoccupations, do not attend to Icarus drowning. At Shiloh and Kelno, the grass continues to grow. Human catastrophe is not important to the engine of life, gorgeously persisting. In autumn, my mother planted a dogwood tree, whose buds must now be bulging. On the warm October afternoon she died. She stood, reached down beyond her walker, leaning to plant tulip bulbs in her front yard, not for herself, but to participate in spring she knew would arrive now without her. And then this is the last poem, Persisting at Home, November 2020. Both my children are safe. I thought when they grew, I would retire from motherhood, but nothing could untether them. My son is just home from his first semester at college. My daughter's with her husband in Maine. The ties become longer, more elastic. My parents linger in things, old recipes, the iron frying pan, a bunged up chisel. In my mind's deprecating utterances and the reaching tendrils of my mother's plants. My cat, with her short, assertive sentences, announces what she wants, leads me to it. On my lap, her purr reaches into my belly. We settle into each other. Sun from the window makes patterns on the yellow sofa, slips down onto the rug, crawls across the room, or rain remembers the roof and grass. On gray days, my husband turns on the lamps, making the rooms glow. At night, he sleeps next to me or does not sleep, but the animal of his body is near, his heavy, persistent warmth. Thank you.